All right, so Jim Vieira is a private explorer, been on several mainstream TV programs, or not Jim Vieira, but Hugh Newman. Jim Vieira is a stonemason, and they've uncovered, uh, basically documented several articles from old newspapers and archaeological excavations from the late 1800s and early 1900s of ancient Indian burial mounds that contain entire civilizations of giants of an average 8 to 9 feet tall, all of them. And that would explain the megalithic structures, perhaps, and give us insight on why there are these reports of giants. If they're in the ancient world, if there's all of these reports, if there's all of these legends of giants, these like gods, Hercules and Zeus, and you got Greek gods, and you got the Chinese gods, and you got the Hindu gods, like a million of those. There could be, a truth to the legend, a truth about dragons, a truth about the giants, and that these are actually things that existed, even though they don't exist anymore. Good evidence. Now, Jim Vieira, who they did the National Geographic special on, they did not find any bones. And other than the ones I'm going to show you, the like photographic evidence, and there is like one finger bone, and then here's the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. It's actually giants on display there, the skeletons. But they will say that this was a form of giganticism, some kind of mutation that made them taller. But that can only work if you're looking at like an isolated situation. If this is something that's generally happening all over the world, where there are people, multiple people in one graveyard that are giant, well, then you have a global phenomenon. You have something that's normal in the genetics, for people to grow to excessive heights. The Bible says that there were giants in the earth before the flood and also after the flood, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and bare children unto them, and the same became men of renown. Could be talking about these giants. So all over ancient North America, there have been burial mounds, that have been excavated, and they were excavated in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It's known that they were excavated and then reburied and then kept safe by law. Legislation was put in place to protect the ancient native burial mounds. Still to this day, you cannot do archaeological excavations from them unless you get special permission. But it's known that they excavated them in the past. What is a controversy is whether or not they had uncovered giants. Because if they had, there's no evidence today, no physical evidence of a giant bone, only photographic evidence. And, there's all these eyewitness testimonies. So just because you don't have a bone doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true, because you have the eyewitness testimonies, you have the documentation, the measurements, you have the photographs, and I'm about to show you some of those. So that's something. And the mounds still exist. So there's a potential that you could actually still dig one up if the laws weren't in place forbidding you to enter into the mound. There's some mounds in Oklahoma where I live, in Spiro Mound, Oklahoma. You can go there. Jim Vieira and Hugh Newman, both actually the authors of this book, they went there and they presented them this book, and that guy told them that there was never any giant found there and that he doesn't even know what they were talking about. Owner of the museum. It's ridiculous, because it was documented. They found that. This is, something that was reported in the news back at that time. So maybe it was there or was not there, but at least he could concede to the fact that, that's what they were, that it was at least talked about, but, when you mention like giants, you go up to a museum and ask them if they've ever had giants or some evidence for any evidence for ancient advanced technology, something that contradicts the status quo, they're going to tell you that they don't know what you're talking about. Like, where did you hear that? Because that's strange. They'll act like they don't know what you're talking about. They do. They're told, they're paid to tell you that they don't know what you're talking about, so that they can keep their jobs. That's why they do it. It's a cover up. People do this, in businesses all the time. They're told to say and not say certain things for the safety of the business. Okay, so if you're going to sell something, if you're going to have a market, well, you don't want any competitors. You need a status quo. You need a common theme for your product. I mean, that's marketing 101. So if you're going to sell science, you don't want something contradicting the status quo. You have to keep it, a certain paradigm so that people will buy it. Because if you have multiple options, then you're not going to gain as much of a profit necessarily. Just depends on what you're selling. Science is a little too controversial to be that divided. People, if you can get people to believe that most of the scientific community agree, they have one consensus on something, well, then they're most likely to purchase all of the popular books and everything else. So it's all connected to make a profit. That's what I think. That's why the Smithsonian is probably responsible for covering these things up. The physical bones probably do exist, but they're not available to us in order to protect the market. It's not even necessarily that these people have an agenda, like even Jamie was saying earlier. They're not necessarily have an agenda to serve Satan, but they just have a market that they have to protect. They have, a business that they have to operate. And you can't just uncover evidence for dinosaurs and man living together, or giants that used to be all over North America, or, machine cutting on the ancient megalithic structures. If you publish stuff like that, well, then you're going to lose money instead of gain money. That's all I'm saying there. So you can take it how you want. Anyways, here's the skeletons I already showed you in the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. It's a list of 10 discoveries. The giants in West Hickory, Pennsylvania, they said that they found a report of one that was 18 feet tall. And then the smallest one is the Serpent Mount in Ohio at 7 feet tall. There's San Diego, California, 8'4" giant. Here's a giant axe head. There's Hugh Newman there holding the axe. And that is like a 10-pound axe head. Who's swinging an axe with that much weight? You can pick up a regular axe sometime and swing it, and let me know how you would feel if that just the head alone weighed 10 pounds. It's crazy. This was ancient America, New Hampshire, England, megalithic structures in America. That one was in New York. They put this huge stone and set it on these small stones. This is ancient stonemasonry in America. They say that it was built by like colonists, which is certainly possible. The Romans would have been capable of a feat like this. So it's just providing evidence that the ancients, they have a lot more skill than what the secular scientists or archaeologists mainstream want to give them credit for, just because they want to protect a certain paradigm. And then here's another 10-pound axe head. Okay, there's a giant pipe. Who's smoking a pipe that big? I don't know what they're smoking. Secondly, and then here's a photo of a giant skeleton discovered at Dixon Mounds in Illinois. That one, I don't know how big that was, but 8 to 9 feet tall. Crave Creek Mound in West Virginia. There was the ancient Paleo-Hebrew on this little stone that they found in that mound. So why is there a stone with ancient Hebrew writing in an ancient Indian burial mound? That's significant right there. Here's a finger. You got a normal finger under it, a giant finger above it that's been excavated out of one of these mounds. So there are some fragments of the bones out there. You can read that book and you can make your own decision. But I believe that the Bible says there were giants. There were people living to be nearly 1,000. and they were artificers of brass. They knew how to work with gold, iron, silver, make instruments, construct buildings, stone, carve temples into mountains, all kinds of amazing things because people were created by God. And we came from a 600-year-old man named Noah, faced a Gilligan's Island situation where you have, you know, a lot of intelligence, but very little resources. And so if you find like an axe head, or if you find a arrowhead and one of them looks more primitive than the other, that doesn't necessarily mean evolution, like they're getting smarter. It could mean they're spending more time. Yeah, definitely. Probably. My theory is my theory is that these were saved men that were marrying unsaved women for the intention of producing an excessively tall person, not like 8 to 9 feet tall. They were going for 14, 15, massive individuals and it was probably the women and their wicked fathers. It's all that wicked culture. The Bible says that Solomon went after many wives and even followed after their gods. And Solomon was saved. What's he doing worshiping other gods? Well, because of women. And this is the problem in the Bible with polygamy. It causes serious problems. And it produced, I believe that it's actually what produced the giants. Promiscuous sexual lifestyles of saved. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's some kind of artificial breeding experiment. You just, you know, you yeah, yeah. You could get a population of people that are like 7 feet tall just by continually removing the people that aren't 7 feet tall, over a period of several generations, and you could have a bunch of 7 footers. So I think that's what's happening here. Yeah, No, yeah, that's the incest problem. It's actually based on a straw man, thinking that the way that, things are today is the same way they are in the past, aka genetic mutations. They're assuming that they basically didn't exist or that they still existed at the time people were living to be nearly 1,000 years old. Like, why would there even be any genetic mutations in the first place? You wouldn't be able to live that long. It doesn't, because you have to. Yeah, you just have to think of the culture, because today there's plenty of people. Back then, you're trying to get people. So what do you think is logical? When there's no one else available, you're not going to report them to the cops because they're doing it too. This is the purpose. You're not you're not marrying your sister because that's the person you wanted to marry necessarily. You're doing it because she's the only person available on the planet. Yeah. Yeah. Not specifically, no. Yeah, man, that's greatly appreciated. Thanks for coming on here, Jamie. Yeah, for sure. All right, night, Jamie.